Hi everyone, my name is John. Welcome back to my channel. One of the New Year's resolutions that I made for 2025, at least regarding this booktube channel, is to come to you at least once a month and tell you about what I've been reading. I know in the past couple of years, sometimes my Friday Reads videos are a little sparse throughout the year. But I think what I can do is once a month, this is going to be my installment for January. I can come to you whenever I've started a book or two. I can just say a few words about it, some of my initial impressions. I may not be very far into it, but just give you sort of first thoughts before I bring you a more fully fleshed out review once I'm done. And sometimes I don't make it through a spectacular number of books in a year. So I know some people do Friday Reads videos every weekend. I think I would be showing you books 2 and 3 times if that was the case. So to save you from the boredom and seeing the same thing over and over again, I think once a month will probably suit me pretty well. So let me tell you what I'm reading this weekend. And let me start off with the thing I'm a little bit more familiar with. And the thing I love to gush over. I think I've already gushed over it in my Historathon Q1 recommendations videos, but it is actually one of the books that I've picked up from that video and promised to read. I think I told you that I was going to read it with some other people. And that is St. Augustine's Confessions. This is the Oxford World's Classics edition, and this is translated by the great Henry Chadwick, who is a scholar of patristic and early church literature and history. And I've read this book at least once before, and maybe twice. And I'm a little bit on our reading schedule that we have going on in the Discord. I've only made it through the end of book 3. But this is every bit as wonderful as I remember it being the first 1 or 2 times I read it, and even more so. He just gives you, Augustine does in this book, just a wealth of ideas, approaches to think about him as a person, to sort of conceptualize him across the centuries. And I think one of the things that we've reconciled ourselves to in the Discord group is he's so different from us. Of course, he lived 1,600 years ago. He's very different from us. He has opinions that we will reject. But seeing how he got to those opinions, seeing how he formed them, seeing how he rationalizes them, given his worldview, really, at least for me, makes this one of the reasons why this is what I call my desert island picks. If there were 5, 10, 15 books that I could take with me and spend the rest of my life with on a remote desert island, this would be one of them. And another reason is because he is such an idiosyncratic, inward, critical, but also sometimes funny and sardonic and sarcastic person. He's so incredibly multifaceted and so complex that it's hard, at least for me, to not fall in love with him when you read this book. His worldview is shaped through the lens of late classical and very early medieval Christianity, as you certainly know. I'm a thoroughly secular person myself, but that might seem like a big remove. That might seem like some sort of irreconcilable difference, but it even somehow makes him more interesting and more endearing. I don't know what it is. He's just absolutely enthralling to read. We're having a pretty lively conversation in the Discord. Not the Historathon Discord, oddly enough. It's one of Justin's Discords. Justin has a channel here on... He's one of the co-hosts of Historathon, but it's not the Historathon Discord. He has a philosophy Discord that I'm also a member of, and we're talking about it over there. I guess I really haven't asked anyone, aside from, we're talking about the subjects that he raises in the book, but I haven't asked anyone how they're just generally liking it, just as a book. So if you're participating in the Discord and you watch this video, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section. What do you think about the book? What do you think about his, not necessarily the arguments he's making or his worldview, but what do you think about his personality? And do you think the book is effective in being a confessional, autobiographical, sort of pour your heart out on the page book? I'd be curious to know what everyone thinks. I love it. Hopefully this will not be the last time I read it, and I will spend the rest of my years trying to convince everyone else to read it too. So, Augustine's Confessions. Now for two books that are completely and utterly new to me in their subject. As far as the classical world goes, most of my reading time as a former Latin student has been, Rome. Okay, so it's been a little bit later than these two books. So these have taken me back further in time, but also to another culture entirely. And we're talking about Greece here. Greece at its height. And let's see, which one should we do first? Let's do this one first. This is from Yale University Press, who so rudely made me pay for this book. How dare they make me pay for a book? But, no, I actually found this in a bookstore. I didn't request it or anything. This is Democracy's Beginning, the Athenian Story by Thomas N. Mitchell. And this is basically a chronological story of Athens told through the lens of its political development in democracy. So it takes you all the way, from Solon and Solon's first reforms through Cleisthenes and his sort of strengthening of democracy with the underpinnings of equality of involvement of more citizens, the reforms of Ephialtes, and the sort of height of Periclean democracy. And then, of course, when the Second Peloponnesian War ends in, what was it? Was it 404? 403 or 404? There's a period in Athens history known as the 30 Tyrants, the rule of the 30 Tyrants. And then after the rule of the 30 Tyrants, there is a re-strengthening of democratic rule-making and law-making. So it takes you over that entire arc of Athenian history. Goes through the major figures, some of which I just named, Solon, Cleisthenes, Ephialtes, Pericles, etc. Tells you about their reforms, what they were, how they were enacted, the thinking that went into them. And I am only about a third of the way or so through the book, if you don't count the endnotes. And it's a good book. It's just it's a lot of information and new names, not new names, but concepts, the names I'm mostly familiar with. It's that I have no idea what chronological order they were really in. So had you asked me 2 weeks ago who came first, Cleisthenes or Solon, I wouldn't have been able to tell you. But it reminds me that when I'm reading a book about a subject that's completely new to me, I really, really need to be more diligent about taking notes. Because there's a lot of information, hard and fast, dates, important ideas, and if I don't take notes, the information just sort of washes over me. It's with me for a few days, but then when I come back to visit it in a few months, I'll remember the overall shape of the argument, but the details have all pretty much been lost. So that is, it's not too late. Like I said, I'm only 80 or 90 pages into it, but that is something I'm realizing that I need to do. A really good, solid book so far, and especially if you have your bearings in Greek history down, like I don't, then this is a really solid retelling of that sort of political history, specifically democracy's beginning, the Athenian story by Thomas and Mitchell. And the last book I'm reading this weekend is by, God bless them, they always drag him out when they need a classicist, especially an ancient Greek specialist. This is by Paul Cartledge. This is his book, the Spartans. The Spartans, not the Athenians. The world of the warrior heroes of ancient Greece. Paul Cartledge has made more than his fair share of appearances on one of my favorite shows. I guess it's a sort of a podcast. It's sponsored by the BBC. It's called In Our Time, and it's hosted by a man named Melvin Bragg. And he's been doing this show since the late 90s, I think. And whenever they need someone to talk about ancient Greece, specifically Athens or Sparta, they drag out Paul Cartledge, and he's probably done 40 or 50 of those In Our Time episodes over the past 25 years. In fact, I was just listening to one a few nights ago on the Peloponnesian War. And this is a history of Sparta taken through, let's see, what years does he really focus on? 480 through 360. BC, of course. And that obviously takes you from the beginning of the Persian Wars through the end of the Spartan hegemony over Athens at the end of the Peloponnesian War, and a little past that, maybe like a generation or two past that, up to 360. And I like this book because it gives you a little bit of the social and cultural history as well. Try not to move the book around too much, like Justin does. But it also gives you, it's a history that's told mostly through Sparta's involvement in the Greco-Persian Wars and the Peloponnesian Wars. And because the aristocracy is obviously so important with that, it in many places reads like a list of kings and nobles and people who are related to them, and unfortunately doesn't really have many of the family trees that I would like. So, of course, I can get those online, but it would be nice to have them here. And like I said, there is a little bit of cultural, social history. It tells you a little bit about, when young Spartan boys were taken away from their family at the age of something like 7 or 8 years old and sent off to start a military education called agoge, Agoge. It tells you about their legislative system and bodies, their the Gerousia, the sort of council of old men. It's interesting, but I think having a better grasp on the major events of the Persian and Peloponnesian Wars would make this even better. He comes across as one of those professors. He is an academic, writing for a popular audience, although, that is really, really enthusiastic about the subject and just wants to spill everything he possibly can in a 280-page book. And because he's so enthusiastic, it's just a lot of ideas, names, places, dates, biographical information about the figures, which to some extent you would expect, but I almost would have liked this to be longer so that the information was less compact and had a little bit more room to breathe. I've never read anything by Paul Cartledge before, but I am, by the way, almost finished with this. I have about 20 more pages to go. But I wish he would have taken a few breaths and just sort of thought about the information he wanted to present before he actually started typing it out. But interesting stuff, really helps contextualize the 5th and 4th centuries in Sparta. So this is The Spartans, the world of the warrior heroes of ancient Greece by Paul Cartledge. So those are the 3 books that I am going to spend this weekend reading. Let me know what you're reading in the comments. And like I said, if you are reading St. Augustine with us in the Discord and you have any comments, even anything above and beyond what you think about his personality or how you like the book as a book, feel free to say something. I'm interested in what everyone has to say about that book, simply because it is one of my favorites. I will talk to everyone very soon. Bye.